So I'm going to try something a little different for this video. Instead of using the hard cam, I'm going to use just a floating hand camera, and we're going to see what happens here. See me look over at my notes as I'm going through all of this. This is a long video. Sorry about that. I'm going to try and put little annotations in the bottom so you can skip to the parts that you want. But today, I'm going to be covering all of the planets in the cosmos of Hyperion. First, the main place that we play the game at, Hyperion itself, also referred to as the material plane. It is the dead body of the first over-goddess, Gehenna. She was slain by her children, the ancient ones, the old ones, and her body is what the world exists on now. So that's cool. So playing on ancient dead mom, cool. There are two main sides to Hyperion. You have the right side up, also just generally referred to as Hyperion. This is where all mortal beings are born and live their lives. Majority of their lives. There are those who travel to different places within the cosmos for various reasons, adventure, trade, clerical stuff as well. So people find their way all over the place. There's the other side, the upside down. This is where races that have been banned by the gods end up living. So races like the Githyanki, things like that, you're going to find them over on that side, as well as some gods that have rejected their mortal children and have gone over there. So like Anam is over there. Now the upside down is a twisted version of the right side up, and so everything's a little dark, weird, and there's only one way to get there is through the nebulous, which is dark down within the Underdark itself. There is technically a third side as well. It is called Feria. It is the dream world that was created by Corellon Morethian when he was struck down by Lolth, and this is what he uses to preserve his children, the elves. However, that world is being corrupted slowly. No one knows exactly why. There are rumors as to why this is happening, but that's something for you guys to find out. So we have another one main item that connects all of the bodies within the cosmos, and that is the river Styx. It's this green, purple, black, like viscous fluid that has little stars in it. So when you actually look up in the sky at night, or even throughout the day, you can actually see the river Styx flowing through the cosmos itself, and that is something you can actually take and flow to other places. I should actually state that it's only at night that you see that purple black. It's almost like a dark nebula of flow that you see. During the day, it's almost like trail lines, like contrails that you see up in the sky flowing through the world. It's kind of a wispy, white, cloudy structure in the daytime that you can see. And the river Styx, that is where the Raven Queen keeps her citadel as well. So if you ever wanted to visit that, you actually have to travel along the river Styx to get to it. So there are a couple bodies that rotate around Hyperion itself. The first one we're going to talk about is Luna. It is the first moon, and it is also named for the goddess Luna, who is one of the Table of Five. So one of the most powerful goddesses in the world lives there, and she is named for this place. So legend holds that Luna itself, the moon, is actually the head of Gehenna that is left rotating around her body. So super cool there. It is also the origination of all Fey creatures. So that is where Luna has her home. It's also the afterlife for children, anyone who never lost their innocence throughout life. Lovers, mothers, healers, and sailors actually go there as well, because Luna is also the goddess of the sea. So she is in control of all of that, because the correlation between the moon and the tides and whatnot. So she is the overlord of the sea as well. Second, we're going to talk about Seluna. The Seluna, it simply just means second moon. Legend holds that it is actually the eye of Uraninai, the lover of Gehenna, when he laid to rest next to his wife's body and slowly evaporated into the cosmos. Remember that it is his eye that was left there and rotating around. It is the home of the Dragonkin, So this is the origination of where Io came from, and that's a whole story that we don't have time to get into today. But nonetheless, Tiamat and Bahamut both have citadels here. Neither of them claim this is their primary home anymore because they're both busy doing some other big worldly stuff, but this is where most dragons end up in their afterlife as well. The side that always there, it's a title locked moon, but it's not title locked with Hyperion, it's title locked with Sol, the sun, which we're going to talk about next. The side that's always facing Sol is where all of the metallic dragons are going to be spending their time, and then the dark side is where all the chromatic dragons spend their time as well. But there's so much detail. I need to go into that, but I don't have time for that right now. Also, so in addition to dragons, seers, sorcerers, and any type of dragonkin, so kobolds will end up here as well. Legend is Kurlmek lives here as well, and that is that's a whole thing that we can get into at some other time. So next we're going to talk about Sol. Sol itself is that is where the god Sol gets his name from, or vice versa. There's depending on who you ask, they're going to tell you a different answer of where the name came from. But this is where Sol keeps his citadel, and all of his loyalists come here as well in their afterlife. It is the burning heart of Uranin when he again faded into the cosmos. This was left here as well, rotating around the corpse of his wife, the body of his fallen lover. This is also where Asmodeus originated from as well. So he was Sol's right-hand man, and then during the fall of Asmodeus, he was kicked out of here, and that's when he went and established the 9 Hells of Baator. So a lot of pretty much anyone who's a follower of Sol, which is a huge portion of the population, is going to end up here. Paladins, clerics, and also just pious individuals who worshipped Sol are going to end up here. So next we're going to move on to the first cosmological body outside of like the main core, and that is Hell. Now Hell itself is a little strange compared to the other ones because there is no one structure that is referred to as Hell that encompasses everything else like it is with the other cosmological bodies. This one, Hell, is a collection of 5 bodies. So I'm going to set this down for just a second. So the structure of Hell, you have a cone up on top. It is literally just a cone made of rock that circles up on top. Then in the center, you have these 2 parallel planes that rotate around each other with a black, almost looks like a black sun, a black core in the center of it. And then at the bottom, you have a large sphere that rotates around as well. And these pieces are the different areas of Hell itself. And this is primarily where the devils, demons, and evil beings of the universe, with the exception of Gehenna, which has gone through some radical changes, exist. The other cool thing about this is that after the overgods died, essentially, and the ancient ones decided they were going to go into slumber in the tombs of Kadith, which is something we'll get into. There were 3 gods that came, the first 3 gods that came out from the dreams of the great ancient ones. And that's, again, a little bit of, there's deliberation around that. Were they dreamed of the great old ones, or were these 3 additional children that Uranin and Gaimea had to battle the ancient ones? Now, there's some, depending on who you ask, what church you're talking about, they're going to have different answers to this. So the one thing that we do know, though, is that those 3 ancient gods, they vanished at some point, and there's stories behind all 3 of them what happened. This one particularly is referred to as simply known as the Source, because he was the source of the original evil, the original sin. So his name has been lost throughout the ages, so people just refer to him as the Source. This is actually his body as it decayed into the ages. So his head became the cone, and then his body kind of became his arms became the 2 floating parallels, and then his body became the sphere that's below. So start up with the cone. That is the 9 Hells of Baator. Originally it was 10 layers on it, but when Asmodeus found it and it was empty, he ripped off the first layer, and it actually flew down to Hyperion collapsed into the world, and that continent was known as Baator from Baator. And over the time, people didn't like the association that they had with that, so they ended up renaming the continent Hillcrest. So that is where Hillcrest comes from. There is some history with it being known as Baator, so if you refer to it, some people will know what you're talking about. But yes, this is where Asmodeus is. This is the home of the devils, the 9 layers, and all of that lawful evilness that they have there, all about making contracts with individuals to get immortal souls. So this is the afterlife for a lot of evil beings, such as politicians, lawyers, evil knights, evil kings, market speculators that have just fucked everyone else off so they can get rich, bankers that are, screwing over their clients, things like that. Those are the people who really end up here, and just straight up evil warriors who work for evil lords. So Hitler would end up here. So next up on the list, we're going to talk about Hades. It was actually ruled by a god named Hades, and there's a whole video that I'm going to do on that, because I think it is one of the coolest places in the world, and I think he is one of the coolest guys that I've that has come into existence in this world that we're playing in. So I want to make something about that. So it is a big wasteland, essentially, just flat like obsidian and gray, just black and gray stone and dust as far as you can see. However, there is a vibrant town in the center of it called Hades Town. That's where he lives. It's surrounded by this thing called Hades Wall. This guy is absolutely obsessed with himself. He loves his name. And he brings in, this is where a lot of individuals who, he only wants people who bring value to him. So rich people who can buy their way in essentially are the cream of the crop here. He also will take in any like evil scientists, evil engineers, evil artificers, people like that he brings in because he needs people to build his city, to build his wall, to maintain it. And then also individuals who were completely self-obsessed with their physical appearance only. He will bring them in as well. And he uses them. They're kind of the lowest ranking individuals there. There's a whole bunch of crap happening outside of it. It's a cool, really cool plane, but moving on from that. We also have, Gehenna next. So Gehenna used to be a wasteland as well. It used to be pretty much just a battlefield where a couple evil gods of war existed, and they loved it there because it's in the center of the blood war, which is the war between devils and demons. And it was the forefront of that, and it was great. However, the lover of Asmodeus, and rumored to be father of a lot of his children, Sephirum, she fell from grace with Asmodeus. She fell. She was an angel of compassion. That she was actually the mother of all angels of compassion originally, and fell with Asmodeus. But over time, she grew to regret that decision. And I mean, even though she was just an angel of compassion, I mean, she's a god herself. And she went in there and essentially kicked everyone out of Gehenna, or attempted to. And within the Pit of Souls, which is a geological feature within Gehenna, she created this haven. And what she does now is she searches for souls, and she has an agreement to the souls that are people that would end up in evil places like the Abyss, Hades, Hell, or any bad place, or even end up in Limbo. But they have potential for them. She takes them and she rehabilitates them until the soul is worthy of being in a better place like Elysium or the World Tree or someplace like that. And she rehabilitates them, and then she re-gives them to the Raven Queen, who then transports them off to a better afterlife. So she's a pretty good person. We mortals in general really like her. So the Abyss is this big old sphere at the bottom of Hell itself. So we've got the 9 Hells, we've got Gehenna, we've got Hades, we've got the Abyss that's down at the bottom, And then, so what the abyss is, the outermost layer of the abyss is referred to as the 0th layer of the abyss, and it is pretty much a wasteland of volcanoes, ash, and your typical interpretation, a Christian interpretation of hell is what the 0th layer of the abyss is. Lots of demons running all over the place. It's a free-for-all. The one thing that it has is portals to all of the other layers of the abyss. You need to know how to navigate these, and they're quite tricky because a lot has to do with cosmological events as to which portals will be active at what time and where those portals are going to take you to. But it allows people to gain access within the abyss itself. And each layer of the abyss is totally different. This place is complete chaos, which makes sense because demons are the evil beings of chaos. And but these places can range from anywhere from militaristic compounds to just pure lunacy and forests of fungus that are consuming life and everything. So it's a wide range of everything within the abyss. Each layer of the abyss, well, I shouldn't say each. Most layers of the abyss are infinite in size. Even though they're inside the sphere, it's bigger on the inside. Most of them are infinite. There are layers of the abyss within other layers of the abyss, and it's a crazy place. Another thing to remember is that the numbered layer of the abyss is not like stacked on top of each other. It's not like a sphere as you're going in and in and in and in and in. No, that's actually the way that they're numbered is the number in which they were discovered. So that's really where that's really where the numbering system comes from. And as of now, there's well over 900 layers of the abyss. So tons of stuff to explore in there. I mean, could literally have a 10-year adventure in the abyss and you wouldn't even scratch the surface. So tons of stuff in there. Cool. The last feature within hell itself is Limbo, and it is that black mass that was in the center between Gehenna and Hades. Now, Limbo is a location where souls go that simply don't deserve to be anywhere. You weren't good enough to get into any of the good places. You weren't lawful enough to get into any of the like neutral-ish places. You weren't really neutral enough to get into the neutral places, and you weren't evil enough to be punished forever in eternity. So you go to Limbo. Now, usually what ends up happening there is that souls wait there for indefinite periods of time while they wait for a place that belongs to them to exist. And that's one of the ways that kind of places end up coming into existence within Hyperion, because like the ancient ones, they dreamt up everything that essentially comes into existence, and then those dreams have created other beings and structures and society. But the power of belief is very strong as well. If enough people believe something, they can will it into existence. So if enough people are in Limbo that fit into some category and they're looking for that home will come into existence at some point, and then the Raven Queen will come by, scoop up all those people and take them over to that. And and also Bahamut has the ability to send anyone to Limbo that he desires, and that is because he is the overseer of the fate, and he knows if someone is going to be resurrected, and at that point their soul needs to go to Limbo to be safe. One thing about Limbo is that when you're in there, you recognize the passage of time, but once souls come out of Limbo, they have no recollection of anything inside Limbo. They remember exactly for how long they were in there. They had experiences. They know they had experiences, but they cannot recall any specific details of anything. So it kind of does some weird things with your soul mind when you're in there. We're going to talk about Elysium. So Elysium is a large nebula within the cosmos. It's got lots of pinks and yellows and greens and blues. It's very, 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 very pretty nebula. And within there's several structures. This is primarily where a lot of the good afterlife places exist. So this is also the home to angels, archons, and celestials of pretty much any variety end up coming from. So first we have Mount Celestia. This is, as you're flying up or approaching it, it appears as a large golden disc, like rimmed disc or plate almost, with water, like perfectly pure water in it. And then in the very center of that is a massive mountain. So it's absolutely huge in size, but it's similar in shape to Hyperion itself. So you make it to the mountain, and you can climb it, and there's, angels and archons, like I said, that live here. And you'll never be able to reach the top of the mountain, though, until you master one of the 7 virtues. And once you master that virtue, then you can finally make it to the summit. And as soon as you make it to the summit, you find another platform, another mountain to climb there that you can step off onto. And then you have to go up that until you master that virtue as well. Until you master the 7 virtues, then you can go through all 7 layers, or all 7 peaks of Mount Celestia. So, using my handy dandy cheat sheet, because I did not memorize all of these, your 7 virtues are chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, patience, kindness, and humility. So once you master those, you are able to ascend throughout the mountain itself and get to hang out with all the cool gods that live there. Different gods on each layer, and there's one over god for each layer as well that encompasses that particular, the god of that virtue. So this is the afterlife for a lot of pious people. A lot of good common folk end up here as well. Those who strive to encompass one of these virtues in their life, they'll usually end up at that mountain and just hang out on the mountainside, drink some tea for the rest of eternity, play a little bit of bocce ball, things like that. People who in general fought for the greater good, not like physically, but like through acts of like charity work, stuff like that, obviously, as it's one of the virtues. Also, a lot of bards end up here too, and like a lot of good bards end up here just because there's so many people, they can tell so many stories about everything, and it's a way of like kind of sharing the culture. So Zion is the next. It is probably one of my favorites, just for the idea of what it is. It is a massive golden, I guess for lack of a better term, a Rubik's Cube. It is 3-faced on each side, and it rotates constantly just like a Rubik's Cube, one piece at a time. Slowly, but definitely is happening. This is where all of the good warriors end up. So this is where your lawful good paladins, your clerics, your like fighters for knights of specific gods, or who fought for particularly pious kings and queens. This is where all of them end up, and it is nothing but a pure militaristic zone. Nothing but marching, training for battle, and preparing yourself for the end times. So this is basically the army, and a lot of people end up being able to ascend into like being a celestial, like an angel or something like that. If you are particularly good, you can actually raise into that rank. And basically what is happening is they are preparing continuously and endlessly for when the blood war ends. Because if the blood war ends, the amount of resources that are poured into that, it is going to devour all of the cosmos and wipe it clean entirely. So they're preparing for that. Another cool thing is, this is where Bahamut spends a lot of his time. It's where most gold dragons end up as well. It's also where a lot of brass dragons end up, because if you remember, those are the militaristic ones. They're the ones who will go from place to place and find armies of good and like help them as a general to win their battles and whatnot. So this is where a lot of them end up. So I think it's a pretty cool place. I like it a lot. A lot to be done there if you ever end up there. And yeah. So next on the list up there in Elysium is Valhalla. Now Valhalla is very, very what you think that it is. This is where good barbarians, chaotic good warriors and fighters end up. And it is a fjord that you can only find if you are invited by one of the barbarian gods. And if they bring you in there, then the river Styx comes directly up to the river leading through the center of the fjord, where you can hop off onto boats that are waiting there and head off. Now, Valhalla is very, very typical. They fight all day, killing each other, having a great old time fighting, and then afterwards everyone is resurrected and they feast and eat and party together and get ready to go out and do it all over the next day. And they are the kind of almost like the shock troopers to Zion. They are also waiting for the end of the Blood War, and they are going to just have a great old time running through and murdering all the demons that they can when they get the chance. The other thing that they do that is different than Zion, because Zion is far too worried with the end times of the cosmos as opposed to the ending of each cycle on Hyperion. The barbarians are also the ones that help reset order to the world. We've touched on this a few times, but there are cycles within Hyperion. It's an ancient world. This realm is not evolving very fast in general, with the exception of the past 100-something years of just craziness that's happened. But we've mentioned before, there's all these cycles. So people advance, technology advances, and then every about like somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 years, the orcish hordes end up getting too large, because this is what Grummish promised. They get too large, they get too big, they get too riled, and they end up wiping out the face of the earth in a huge purge. And it's happened time and time again since the Great Blue Death. Once the Great Blue Death ended, we've had these cycles. And that's kind of how most gods operate. They understand that it's a cycle and they're cool with this. And they kind of focus on bigger things than what's happening down in the material plane. They want their followers, but other than that, who cares? So once the orcish hordes have ravaged the world and they start to infight, that's when the warriors of Valhalla have their day. They end up going back down onto the material plane and wiping out the orcish hordes. And more or less, they bring them down to a couple hundred, and then they leave. And at that point, there's maybe just a couple hundred of each race. The world is in ruins, and everyone starts rebuilding again. And a little bit of knowledge is passed on from the previous cycle, but not much. I mean, most of the things that people hear about from the great cities and whatnot that were built previously, those are like new legends, new myths. The one thing that people make sure goes through are the gods, and that's because the gods are active and they're going to make sure that they're not forgotten about. So that's one important aspect that Valhalla has. Lastly, within Elysium is Empyrium. So Empyrium is the holiest of sites within the cosmos. It's a big monastery. It is basically a place where you are going to go. This is where all the boring people go. Like the people who want to, like who have done some type of, they've mastered some type of like virtue, but are still fun. They go to Mount Celestia, and it's basically just a party, and they play games all day. Empyrium is where all the monks go, the priests go, and it's really just a place for quiet prayer and contemplation and self-reflection for all of eternity. They don't really produce much for going further. At least in Mount Celestia, a lot of times they will prepare for end times, but they're less so, and it is home to a lot of angels and whatnot. And it's kind of where angels get their gripping as to where these people are even too boring for angels. So this is basically just it's like going to a monastery and hanging out there all the time and just worshiping. The gods are there, and they have all their worshipers around them, and their worshipers are saying how great the god is to their face, and the god's like sitting there, yes, I am the greatest, I am the best. So it's there. Next, we're gonna get to kind of a neutral place called the World Tree. Now this place is kind of cool because it's a massive tree that sprouts in all directions, floating in space, and there's massive plains and discs and just like forests on top of this tree that grow off of it. And the World Tree itself is one of the few places that the body, the name that encompasses all of it, is actually a place you can go to and hang out at. Like Katara is within the World Tree itself. She doesn't exist somewhere, on one of the moons or separate places within there. Like, she actually lives on the World Tree itself. The Sangoma also lives on the World Tree itself. So there's some cool cool action happening there. It's basically just the largest grouping of vines that you've ever seen, but it does also encompass, it kind of spreads out in 3 main directions and encompasses an entire planet, kind of holds it in its wiry hand, these planets. So let's talk about those. We've got the first one, Aborium. Aborium is this is the center of law in the universe. This is Judicar's realm. She is the one that established it and made cosmic law, because prior to that they didn't have cosmic law, and that is when the Great Blue Death happened and all that type of madness. So Judicar's like, this is never happening again. So this is where scholars and lawyers end up, and they have floors of parliament, they have cosmic courts, and essentially everyone's job there is to constantly review the cosmic laws as they are and improve them and debate them endlessly until they get to a point where they find a new cosmological law and change it. And these are laws that all gods must abide by. So kind of boring from most people's perspective, but also at the same time some really cool stuff happens there, because a swift, stroke of the pen and a vote can completely change the world that everyone's living in. So, so the Green Isles. This is a planet that's kind of, wrapped by the vines of this tree, and this is where all the beasts and plants originate from. This is Shah, one of the greatest, one of the gods at the Table of Five. This is where she hangs out, and her entire existence is running across these islands of pure green and messing with plants, kind of being a botanist and a animal husbandryist. So she spends a lot of time crossbreeding animals, trying to perfect them, or selectively breeding animals to make them more perfect. And then when she's finally created something better, she will bring it down to the material plane and give it to the mortals and be like, here you go, check this out. A lot of rangers end up here. Barbarians will end up here as well, that are not all about battle, but more about being one with nature and not being one with society. So people who want to go out and live in the middle of nowhere. And a lot of farmers will end up here as well. And it's just generally a super, honestly, if I had to pick one place to go hang out, go camping at, this is basically Yellowstone National Park, as big as you can imagine. So it's a pretty cool place. Plus, Shot's pretty badass. So Axis. Axis is a series of spherical cities that are connected by more series of tubes and tunnels to each other. It's all clockwork, all cogs. This is basically an engineer or a mechanic's dream place, and that's literally who it's for. Is for people who search for law and order through science. So this is where a lot of those people live. Sangoma, I mentioned she's on the World Tree, so she has 2 locations. This is one of her locations where she has her university, and this is where research happens for the mechanical world itself, which she is in charge of. But she also has a very large bio background, if you will, and that's parts on the World Tree itself. So a lot of gnomes, dwarves, blacksmiths, people like that end up over here. Mirrodin, god of the dwarves, he lives here, hangs out. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting place. It's complete symmetrical, so it's probably boring to people that are not super into elegant design, but yeah. So lastly, what I'm going to talk about is the Far Realm, also known as the Void, depending on who you are asking. This is far beyond the outer reaches of the solar system, as you will, the cosmos, as you will. So if you were to liken this to our solar system, say that everything here would be, everything that I've mentioned up to this point would be within the asteroid belt, and then the Far Realm would be past Pluto, well into the Oort cloud. So way far out there. Actually flying out there is nearly impossible. It is possible. It would take you it would probably take you a generation to, like a Terran's generation to fly out there. So like elves could go out there and come back, but why would you want to? The Far Realm is a very strange place. The best way I can describe what you would see is like rivers of white milk flowing through caverns of yellow brimstone that cascade into the nothingness of the world. And you would find trees made of iron and stone that reach into the sky and sprout seeds that explode into the stars. Very abstract place. Every time that you walk through it, it's constantly changing. So no maps will exist out there. It's impossible to have a map that works out there. This is where the caverns of Kadith exist. So that is the caverns that the Raven Queen found that house the ancient ones, the great old gods. And yeah, they're slumbering out there. They're hanging out. You could actually physically go see them if you wanted to. The chamber has been sealed away, so you'd have to find a way to unseal that. And that was kind of the key that, it's kind of the deal that the Raven Queen made with the Table of Five, because they were going to murder her. But she found this and was like, I'm going to push this doomsday button unless you let me hang out with you guys. So yeah, very, very strange place. But I hope this wasn't too long. Again, I'm going to add the little things in the bottom so you can jump to where you need to. If you have any more questions, you can always ask me. There are, like I said with the Limbo, I'm going to add things as I need to. As of right now, I think that's pretty widespreading. But yeah, if you have any questions, you can either ask me on Discord if you're new here and you've stuck around for this entire video. Good for you. And if you have any questions, you can always ask me in the comments. So I am going to get back to work because my lunch break is almost over. And yeah, I'll see you all later.